And I don't know, right? I don't know who's going to stand up and say, I think I can make money and agree with that. I would like to think, you know, that there's some guys out there, the perplexity guys seem like nice guys, but it's difficult, right? So, how do you figure out how to teach something that you want to be able to give decision-making power to use that decision-making power in a fashion that has your best long-term interests in mind. And so
Exactly.
part of it is morality.
Yeah.
And I think, that's obvious. And that's an idea that I had. I don't know that it's a solution, but it's something. The other part of it is like, is it good? And you and I talked about this like a little bit. So what happens, does AI take all of our jobs, right? Does AI wreck the economy? Does AI simply funnel money up to a handful of, billionaires, et cetera, et cetera? And there's certainly a road there, right? I think it would be naive to think that there's not a road there. But I think also because of, over adoption, perhaps, what I'm seeing is people being very ready to put more trust in this thing than it's necessarily ready for.
Yes.
And I think this is going to create, and you and I talked about this, a little bit of a fix-it economy, a little bit of a scavenger economy down the road. And the example
It's
that I used with you
consistent
was
though, right?
Y2K.
So what you're saying is though, because look, we're early in the curve, right? We're first inning, top of the first inning, and you've
Yep.
seen all these sort of hype cycles, right? You get this. Somebody said this to me a long time ago at a conference, and I would love to credit him, but I forget who it was. But a guy had this term irrational exuberance in boardrooms. That when this new
Yeah.
technology comes out, you get this groundswell of irrational exuberance by the board, the PE, whoever it is, and they think they get as soon as they've read 4 white papers on it and they saw it on their favorite news feed of choice, they're ready to put the entire company's stuff into this thing. And A,
Yeah.
it's not a good idea. B, like it's not ready for that yet. And so I think what you're saying is we're seeing the exact same thing on sort of like a hype curve here.
Yeah. But on steroids.
Yes.
Yeah. And part of it is, I'm gonna leak some of my, maybe old man cynicism in here a little bit, but I think part of it is part of the macro, right? And, you know, one of the things that you'll notice is that the people that are pushing for hyper fast adoption of this thing, when I say people, I mean, corporate entities, are people that can absolutely weather a couple of waves of negative impact from this thing. So if I'm Amazon, you know what I mean? And I know for a fact that I'm both good at technology and diversified enough that if I push, one of my competitors in, let's say, the logistics space or the retailing space or the marketplace space or whatever it is, into buying too deeply into AI and they get hurt by it, how does that harm me?
Yeah. That's a brilliant point.
So, in some cases, there's maybe some gamesmanship here where, I know, I know, but I don't care. But that being said, I think, in terms of jobs, they're going to change. There's a path here where you got to know AI. And I think there is going to be I wouldn't be surprised to have a Y2K moment, right?
Yeah, talk
Where
about you
there's an
you you
entire
you went down
economy,
this road with me. I said
sort of.
I got the Gru light bulb over my head when you said that. I said it's gonna happen. Some version of this is gonna play out.
Right. Yeah. You're like, God, I let it go too far. I took my hand off the wheel. I was looking at what the end of the year was going to look like, and I let a bunch of people go, and I didn't replace them, and maybe I got shot. And this thing was down in the basement, you know, digging and digging and digging and digging and digging, and nobody was paying any attention to it. And now, now I'm sitting on this. Right. So I got to unwind it. I got to fix it. I got to figure out, how not to do it again, et cetera, et cetera. And that's going to be an industry, in the same way that, 50 years ago, there wasn't necessarily an industry for tornado cleanup, but there sure as hell is now. And that's, sort of like the nature of change where, you have to be able to adapt, and people that move fast and get it and are willing to dig in
And so I
will
think
be
what you're
okay.
saying is that look, and you talk to some of these futurology people, and I'll tell you, if you ever want to get yourself, very depressed, 4 o'clock in the morning, watch YouTube and these futurologists, and you like, you get to
Yeah.
guys, it's not. we're going to make it. I'm pretty sure we're all going to figure this out together.
Yeah.
But it's what they're saying is yes, and I agree with them. There's absolutely going to be short-term disruption in the labor market. 1,000,000% that's going to happen. But I think what these guys never really pick up on is what you just said. Is you're going to have people that are going to have to go build picks and shovels to clean up whatever initial messes are going to happen. It's inevitable. Every one of these sea changes in technology, to your point, this is obviously on steroids, but it's going to create, some sort of, knock on secondary, tertiary cottage industries as a result of that. I just absolutely, and that's not going to be short term, but I think mid and long term, you're going to see careers like, look, what you and I didn't exist 50 years ago. Not really. I mean, it really didn't. And I think, somewhere in the Bible, Moses was saying, oh, kids today, everything's, disaster. Every subsequent generation has figured it out, and it looks radically different today than it did a long, long time ago. But what you'll eventually, I agree with you, you're going to see these industries crop up here and there.
Yeah, for sure. Just to persist that metaphor, right? You're also going to see a vulture economy,
Yes.
right? So when a town gets wiped out by, tornadoes, some people come in and they make a little money off fixing things up, but there's another group that comes in and buys everybody out and owns the town, and that will also happen here, to sort of the earlier point, which is that if you have means, you're going to be looking at undervalued software and companies and that kind of thing who are sitting on a problem. And you might see some fundamental value there in terms of product or human capital or whatever it might be. And if you've got the means, you're going to come up and you're going to take those. So, like most things in our world anyway, here, the rich will get richer. I don't think that there's any way to say that that's not going to happen. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all opportunity is gone.
Yeah, I
It
think,
just
what
changes.
it opens the door. Yeah, look, again, this is one of these age-old things, rich get richer. Like it's
Right.
kind of a universal truth. But what I think this will absolutely do is open up a ton of doors. And for like really bright, industrious people